Hello friend, I'm Dr. Arun Shrivastava, working as an additional professor in the Department of Neurosurgery, SGPJ, Lucknow. As one of my area of research and area of interest is pediatric neurosurgery, with that background, I'm going to give you an overview on spinal dysraphism. I'm very happy to notice, and you will also appreciate, that in last few decades, the incidence and prevalence of spinal dysraphism is going down. And a lot of credit goes to these three important parameters. These are folate supplementation, which has to be started pre-conception. And second very important thing is the prenatal high resolution ultrasound. So this prenatal high resolution ultrasound diagnosed this spinal dysraphism in prenatal period. And after mom's trial, we know that we can intervene and perform some surgery and some diversion for hydrocephalus and give good result. As well as in complex cases, we can advise or prefer the termination of pregnancy, and that is how it's attributing to decreasing incidence and prevalence of neural tube defects. Similarly, the prenatal biochemical marker like alpha-fetoproteins also helps in detecting this spinal dysraphism prenatal period, and with that we can modify the treatment or we can go for the termination of pregnancy. This dysraphism word itself explains that it is imperfect fusion, and this imperfect fusion is actually in the midline. So something which is not able to close or remain open, that is what the meaning of dysraphism. And because of this imperfect fusion of the midline, mesenchymal bony and neural structure, this neural elements with its meninges, sometimes it's herniated and sometimes it's not herniated through this defect. And if I really want to summarize or conclude, then this spinal dysraphism is nothing but it lies on the spectrum of neural tube defect, where we are dealing with the only spinal component combined with the skeletal defects. This old terminology is very important to understand in the form of spina bifida aperta, spina bifida cystica, or spina bifida occulta. We know that occulta is can be seen as a very simple cases, but they can also be seen in a very different permutation and combinations, from simple to very, very complex situation or scenario. So just leave aside this spina bifida occulta. If we see these two groups, aperta and cystica, then we understand if a lesion, protruding lesion, is having a membrane or pseudomembrane, is going to have better prognosis. And that is why this classification in the form of aperta and cystica is important. So if you are saying cystica, then you understand that they are going to have a better prognosis. So how to manage this spinal dysraphism, how to understand and how to prognosticate. And I think for that, a very, very important thing is to understanding the embryogenesis. If you'll understand the embryogenesis, you will understand why this problem is occurring, what kind of presentation the patient is going to have clinically as well as radiologically, and how you are going to manage it, mainly surgically. So, neural tube embryogenesis is explained in three broad heading: the gastrulation, the primary neurulation, and the secondary neurulation. So what happened in the gastrulation? Actually, we know, I'm going to start from day 12, when the embryo is in the form of solid ball. It's kind of solid ball. The outermost layer of this solid ball is the syncytial trophoblast. The middle wall is the cytotrophoblast, and the innermost wall is the extra-embryonic mesoderm. And from this extra-embryonic mesoderm, the bilaminar disc is attached. So by looking at procaudal plate in developing embryo, we understand, because procaudal plate is on the cranial side and on the ventral side. So we understand which side is the cranial, which side is the caudal, which side is the dorsal, and which side is the ventral. So this bilaminar disc is like a elongated big disc. and the outer dorsal layer is formed by the epiblast, and the ventral layer is formed by the hypoblast. This bilaminar disc is lying in the chorionic cavity. So this is the chorionic cavity. Now, next step is to develop ectoderm, future ectoderm, mesoderm, endoderm, and notochord. So what happens? All the future layers of ecto, meso, and endo is developed from epiblast. So this epiblast, they start differentiating and moving inside through a furrow. That furrow is known as primitive streak. So they are actually going inside like a symmetrical waterfall from both the side, and then they are going deep inside, and then they are forming a layer just above the hypoblast, and this undergoing layer is going to form future endoderm, and then the cells trapped between the future ectoderm and future endoderm is going to form the future mesoderm. Now, what's about notochord? So this differentiation of cells which are going inside is in the very rapid speed and in rapid and in bulk and in good quantity is occurring on the cranial side near the procaudal plate. So the cranial side, this is not known as primitive streak. This is known as primitive node because they are like a node. In node form, they are going inside, big node form. So understand, from ectoderm, they are attached to the ectoderm. Their cells which are going inside is known as notochord process. And this cell is going inside in the mesodermal layer. They are going up to the endoderm like a tubular manner. First, they are in the form of notochord process, then they form a plate, then they form a tube. So why this tube is important? This tube has started from ectoderm as we understand, and it's gone in a tube-like manner to the endoderm, and at one step it is opened cranially towards the ectoderm and ventrally towards the endoderm to communicate what? They are communicating. Here somewhere will be amniotic fluid, and here somewhere will be yolk sac fluid. So they are actually communicating amniotic fluid to the yolk sac, and this pressure equilibrium in developing embryo is very, very important. Then after communicating this fluid for few days, they get closed. So they are getting detached from this endodermal as well as ectodermal layer. And after this detachment, they start forming the solid notochord. So this tubular formation of tubular structure and then getting detached from the ectoderm and endoderm is known as notochord integration. And you will understand how this notochord integration is important to understand some spectrum of spinal dysraphism. So that is how the notochord, solid notochord is formed. So if we divide this gastrulation issues, problems related to gastrulation, we understand there is a defect in notochord formation. There could be defect in notochord formation and clinically represented in the form of caudal regression syndrome or segmental spinal dysgenesis. But defect in notochord integration, if it's on the dorsal side, ectodermal side, dorsal enteric cyst. If it's on the endodermal side, that is towards the gut side, neuroenteric cyst. If any other mesenchymal tissue is trapped, then it is a split cord malformation. So coming to all this entity one by one, the caudal regression syndrome is mainly it's a sporadic disease, but sometimes it could be autosomal dominant and associated with HLX-B9 gene. Around 60% of cases, it is associated with maternal diabetes mellitus. And they are actually clinically two types. And the rule of thumb is, if the conus is lying high, then it is going to give good space below this to cause visceral abnormality and orthopedic abnormality. If the conus is lying low, then there is a less space, less chances for these kind of association. So two types, one is high lying conus, as I explained, with severe visceral and orthopedic complication, low lying conus with milder association. And then Another subset is milder form, that is segmental spinal dysgenesis. And here there is going to be spinal cord dysgenesis or agenesis associated with the bony anomaly, that is vertebral body. So it is more common in thoracic segment compared to the lumbar, and upper spinal cord. If it involves some segment, then upper spinal cord is going to be normal, but the lower spinal cord is going to have following features in isolation or in combination. That is bulky conus, a bulky phylum, thickened phylum, a low-lying phylum. So going to the second component, that is notochord integration related issues. The first is neuroenteric cyst. So what happens in neuroenteric cyst? There is an intraspinal cyst which is lined by the enteric mucosa. It is more common in thoracic area, then followed by the cervical area. And what happens? The notochord separates ventral endoderm, that is foregut, and dorsal ectoderm. So, but during this separation, if it trap any piece of primitive gut or ectoderm, these form the different types of neuroenteric cyst or dorsal enteric cyst. Coming to the third subset, that is split cord malformation, and by definition, it is the separation of the spinal cord into two hemicards, and there are two types. In type 1, both the hemicard is having their own dural tube, and they are separated by some osseous or cartilaginous septum. And in type 2, there is a single dural tube containing two hemicards, and in 15 to 20% cases, they are separated by the intervening fibrous septum. So from our center, we have given we have modified this Dr. Mahapatra's classification of split cord malformation into type A, B, C to in a 3D orientation form. So what we have done, we have observed all the cases of bony spur, and we have found they're not only the ventral bony spur, they are dorsal bony spur as well as complete bony spur. And then in 3D orientation, what is their sagittal orientation, what is their coronal orientation, and what is their axial orientation. And based on that, this paper was published in Journal of Pediatric Neuroscience, JPN, and this in this we have explained several situations. Like in this case, 10-year boy who presented with dermal sinus and difficulty in walking and urinary symptoms. And then we did the detethering, and we have drilled the bony septum, and the child is still having urinary symptoms, but is not develop any other neurological deficit. Similarly, this case of split cord malformation with associated lipomyelomeningocele, and here's a complex variety of split cord malformation with other anomalies in the form of bilateral CTEV foot and lipomyelomeningocele. This split cord malformation is associated with T3rd cord syndrome of both the phylum, and here this is the complete bony septum. So we have described almost all varieties of type 1 split cord malformation as well as type 2. So I already explained the understanding of gastrulation and its association or explanation of different subtypes of spinal dysraphism. Now the next step of embryogenesis is primary neurulation. So basically the primary neurulation occurs in 4 steps. The first very important step is the formation of neural plate. So where it is forming? Actually it is forming in the ectodermal layer. So in ectodermal layer, what happens? The midline ectodermal layer, they start growing separately and in a bulk, and they start differentiating, and that occurs because of the lot of transmitter and chemical agent secreted by the developing notochord. So this notochord releases some substances which stimulate the middle part of the ectoderm, and these get differentiated into the neural plate. Then what happened in second step, there is shaping of this neural plate. Then they start taking a shape. If you can see, that is kind of lazy M shape manner. They start taking shape. And then in third step, they start bending, what I'm calling, describing as a lazy M shape. So on that every point, at the hinge point, they have started bending. So on the hinge point, they bend and they form the neural folds. And then there is a folding of neural plate and they form a group, and then finally there is a fusion of neural folds. So if we see the pictorial representation, this is the ectoderm, what happens in midline because of the notochordal stimulation. This area is defined as a neural plate and this is taking shape and bending. The paramedian ectoderm, this differentiate into the neural crest cells, and we know that several structure is formed by the neural crest cells. And the next other paramedian structure, that is ectodermal layer, that is they form epidermis. So see what happens in further during embryonic development. This ectodermal layer from both the sides get to be detached from this developing neural crest cell, and then they have to fuse with each other. See, so it's looking very simple, but this process is very complex, and this is known as disjunction. So this, any problem related to this disjunction can cause several issues. They can trap structure, they can be laid open and can allow spaces for this developing neural tube, neural structure and meninges to bulge out. So how it is represented in clinical scenario is that in premature disjunction, what happens, the mesenchymal tissue get entrapped and they are represented in the form of lipomyelomeningocele, lipomyelocele and intradural lipoma. But in situation where there is no disjunction is filled, then what will happen? The dorsal dermal sinus will see the clinical situation like dorsal dermal sinus, myelocele and myelomeningocele. So going one by one, that premature disjunction, what happened? The perineural mesenchyme interpose between neural tube and ectoderm, and this mesenchyme differentiate into fat, and this prevent neural tube closure in various degree. That is how we get several types of lipomyelomeningocele or lipomyelocele. So actually they comprises spinal lipomas, all the three conditions, and they are most common, 35% of occult spinal dysraphism. These fat collection is at least they are partially encapsulated, and they are connected with the spinal cord. They are always occurs in dorsal. They are always occurs dorsal to the defect, and they can also be associated with the open type of neural tube defect. So these are the various type of lipomyelomeningocele and lipomyelocele treated at our center. Here one is associated with the dermal sinus and dimple. So in my next few slides, I'll explain the difference between these two. In non-disjunction, what happens? There is a formation of dorsal dermal sinus, which is most common in lumbosacral area, followed by the occiput, and they are always associated with the focal dysraphism. So we, by embryogenesis, we understand that is going to happen. So the difference between dorsal dermal sinus and dimple. The ostium in dorsal dermal sinus used to be more than 5 millimeter, and they are always removed from the anus, that is more than 2.5 centimeter. That is how we differentiate dimple from the true dorsal dermal sinus. And they goes up to the dura, but rarely below the dura. They do happen, but it is very rare. And around 50% of this dorsal dermal sinus associated with the dermoid and epidermoid. So this is one case of dorsal dermal sinus is lower thoracic area with bony and other anomalies confirming the dysraphism, and this patient was discharging CSF-like material and purulent material. The second subset of primary neural lesion is non-disjunction group, which comprises myelocele and myelomeningocele. Both of them are, both this group are going, they are characterized by the presence of neural placode. What is this neural placode? They are nothing but the neural folds which fails to flex and fuse into a tube, and they are flat neural structure. And in case of myelocele, they are limited up to the level of canal, but in case of meningomyelocele, they actually protrude outside. So here the neural placode is flat, and in case of myelomeningocele, they are elevated. And then there is another important differences, a few other important differences is important to understand as far as surgical management is concerned, that in myelocele, the subarachnoid space is small. And in cases of meningomyelocele, the subarachnoid space is very large. Then another thing is the membranous ring around the lesion. And that is actually formed by the pia mater and the arachnoid. So it's pia arachnoid ring, which is encircling the neural placode. It's very tight in case of myelocele, and it is very loose in case of meningomyelocele. And we all know that around 62% of this meningomyelocele are associated with Chiari-2 malformation. So what I have explained has become very difficult to understand. So this is the diagram to understand what I was talking about, the difference between meningocele and myelomeningocele, and the same difference holds true for the lipomeningocele and lipomyelomeningocele. Only thing is they will be trapped within camel structure like fat. So here I was talking about the neural placode is well contained up to the level of the neural canal. Here in the case of meningomyelocele, they are protruding outside. Then second is the subarachnoid space is less. Here the subarachnoid space is more compared to the myelocele. Then I was talking about this membranous ring. This pia arachnoid is loosely attached to the neural placode, so you have space to work around to release this placode in case of myelomeningocele, but they are very tightly anchored on this in this myelocele, so you don't have much space to manipulate around this to release this neural placode from all this anchoring and attachment. So and the incidence of myelocele is more than the myelomeningocele. So we understand the prognosis is better in this subset because surgically we have plane to work around the placode and release this placode. That is why I was explaining the same in last slide with a lot of explanation. So this is one clinical photo showing the myelomeningocele, and this is the radiological picture of meningocele, and this is T2 showing total cystic with pseudomembrane covering. So these cases used to have a good prognosis, but compared to the myelocele. So we understand the spinal dysraphism associated with gastrulation because of gastrulation, and types of spinal dysraphism because of the failure or problem with the primary neural lesion. There could be some type of spinal dysraphism which can be explained by the failure of this both gastrulation and primary neural lesion, and these are like hemimyelocele and hemimyelomeningocele. Now we have to understand the the third step of this embryogenesis of central nervous system, mainly focusing to the neural tube defect, is the secondary neural lesion and retrogressive differentiation. So this happened in the human embryo, and this is what happens. The cells distal to the caudal neuropore, they form a mass. That mass is known as caudal cell mass. So they differentiate and they further get canalized. Once they are canalized, they get fused with the neural tube, distal neural tube, and then they become the part of this distal neural tube. But this is the important step where later on there is retrogressive differentiation of this terminal structure, and because of the problem in this secondary neurulation, we get these kind of spinal dysraphism in kids, that is abnormal long spinal cord, persistent terminal ventricle, tight phylum terminal, anterior intrasacral meningocele, and terminal myelocystocele. So these clinical situation occurs because of problems in secondary neurulation and retrograde differentiation. This is one clinical picture of tight phylum terminal. So we should also be knowing about the cutaneous marker, because in occulta, yeah, sometime in a silent spinal dysraphism, we we uh, we go for the radiological and other clinical assessment based on this cutaneous marker. So there are some high index suspicious markers and there are some low index. The high index markers are hypertrichosis and dural sinuses, dermal sinuses, ecrocordons, pseudotalar truticle, lipomas, hemangiomas, aplasia cutis scar, or dermoid cyst or sinuses. But we should not neglect this low index suspicious cutaneous marker, because they can also be associated with the spinal dysraphism occulta. They are telangiectasia, port wine stain, hyperpigmentation, melanocytic nevi, and teratoma. So one such example is only tuft of hair, and then when we uh, evaluated this patient who was having mild urological symptoms, then we have found bony spur, we have found this T-third part syndrome as well. So this is the very complex subset that is spina bifida occulta. There used to be mesenchymal defect without neural or meningeal herniation, and such examples are hydromyelia, split notochord syndrome, dorsal dermal sinus, and diastometomyelia. So this isolated condition, they form the spectrum of spina bifida occulta. So if I'm asked to summarize this embryogenesis related defect and problem, I must summarize in the form of these four subtypes. That is, in type 1, the neural plates remain open, that is myeloschisis, and in type 2, neural tube being exteriorized in the form of myelomeningocele, and in type 3, meninges being exteriorized, that is meningocele, and there could be merely a skeletal defect being evident, that is spina bifida occulta. So this is the simple way of understanding these types of neural tube defect which occurs in spinal dysraphism. So ultimately, we understood that these patients, they are presenting with obvious swelling at the back, sometime discharging swelling, maybe discharging CSF, or sinus discharging pus or other purulent material, and tuft of hair, deformity. So something very obvious with the kid, and the parent are noticing and coming to us. And sometimes they are actually occult and silent. So maybe worked up by the neonatologist, a pediatrician, or your urologist friend, and then they have been referred to you. And then sometimes they present with the orthopedic complications, and then secondarily you get to know that patient is having spinal dysraphism in various permutation and combination. And another very important uh, goal of this further assessment and radiological assessment is the association of uh, one neural tube defect with other, or association of several defects with each other, sometime in the syndromic forms. So like when we are working up for the spinal dysraphism, we go to see the or screen the brain as well, mainly the mainly to rule out hydrocephalus and posterior fossa abnormality or anomalies. So these are very well explained and obvious parameters to be evaluated. Then coming to the surgical goal, I think in obvious cases we know the surgical goal is to free the placode from the surrounding abnormal anchoring. And while explaining the myelocele and meningomyelocele, I have already explained you the factor predicting the safe separation of this anchoring from the neural placode. So in myelomeningocele, you have good plane to separate it, but in myelocele, you don't have. And then the first goal, as I said, is to free the placode from the surrounding abnormal anchoring structures. And the second step is to reposition the placode into the spinal canal. And then the third step is to reconstruct the surrounding structure. So as we know, a lot of structures are failed to be there or to form the normal layers. So we understand there used to be a lot of difficulty in reconstructing the this gap. But at least we should focus upon the closure of the dura mater, and we should augment as far as possible the opening or the closure of the dura mater. Then I must add that surgical techniques depends on the size and as well as the level of the lesion and the understanding of the individual cases. Believe me, it is a multidisciplinary, it requires a multidisciplinary approach, because you need to have a pediatrician, and if you really want to follow the patient or diagnose the patient from the prenatal period, that is a person from a maternal reproductive health department who deals with this complicated cases, and those who are following these cases from the prenatal time. Then in immediate post natal period, you need a neonatologist to manage your cases, or sometimes they refer the cases to you. Then this all orthopedic, not actually mainly the spinal, but other abnormality like foot deformity, and you need an orthopedic colleague with you. Then you need a urologist colleague with you to address the urinary problem. And then plastic surgeon, sometimes the defects are so big that you need to have a free pedicle or vascular grafts to cover that area. And then one thing I must focus or must add, I must discuss with all of you is the importance of pediatric neuroanesthetist. And believe me, the outcome and the result has drastically changed after having a good pediatric neuroanesthetist in the team. And the MOMS trials has shown a lot of hopes, and we must talk, discuss, and should be looking at this perspective of in prenatal or intranatal management of these kids. As I already mentioned, always rule out hydrocephalus and Chiari malformation, because sometimes addressing the only spinal dysraphism or protruding mass will not address the issue, and you will end up with the increasing hydrocephalus, CSF leak, the complication related to that. Last but not the least is the electrophysiological monitoring in these cases, as these will predict the disability or post-operative complications, and that will help you in giving good result. So with that, I would like to end my talk on overview on spinal dysraphism. And with all this detail, you feel free talking and asking to me if you have any queries related to this presentation. Thank you so much.